Lore Together is proud to be part of the Boss Rush Games Network. Feel free to find out more at bossrushgames.com/network. Hi, I'm Safi.
And I'm Mystic.
And this is Lore Together. This is the podcast where a husband and wife team go over all the storytelling, world building, and characters of video games. Because it's what we like to do together. We lore together.
Yep, and this is episode 65.
Woohoo! Thanks for joining us.
But before we get into the episode, if you'd like to contact us, you can do that through Instagram or Twitter at LoreTogether, through email at loretogether@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do that over on patreon.com/loretogether, where you can pay a per episode pledge to get early access to episodes, as well as a bunch of other stuff that we should probably be doing more often.
Yes.
Great pitch.
Fantastic pitch.
Thank you.
It's primo pitch time here in the Lore Together household. But yes, there is more stuff that we would like to do. We are now in the midst of Gen Con season, aka Mystic's work is
And
grueling.
your work, kind of.
Yeah, my side gig, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, it's also my side gig, let's be honest.
No. Anyway, so regardless, we should figure out what today's episode is because you didn't tell me and you were very scared that I was going to figure it out.
Well, I had a lot of tabs and stuff open and flying around all my different monitors, and yeah.
Yeah, the secret to not knowing what the heck was going on with that was merely just not looking at your computer.
That's
which,
fair.
As much as your screens are super huge in our office space, it was easy to avoid.
There, well, yeah. So episode 65, as I said, this is a 2019 game.
Another really recent one. Okay, it's like we're making up for when we had that big stretch of like early games.
Yeah. And how can I tease this one? I don't know how to
With a hairbrush?
I'm not going to tease it. Let's just jump in. It is by Finnish developer Remedy Entertainment. You may know them.
They do not ring a bell.
You know some of these games. Max Payne.
Oh, yeah, I know
Alan
them.
Wake.
Of course.
Quantum Break. You might not know that one.
I do not know that one.
And the one we'll be covering today, Control.
I feel like I've heard of this. But I don't... Gosh, this is so bad. The problem with really recent games is that the last few years... Like, 2019 was fine in general. But we actually had a very busy 2019. And we were like, 2020 will be smooth. No.
Pandemic, kid, what else? Also...
Yeah, a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, Remedy Entertainment also seems to feature one of our favorite bands, Poets of the Fall, quite frequently.
Poets of the Fall. Well, they're from the same...
I believe one of their band members is one of the audio directors at Remedy. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're from the same country then, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because Remedy Entertainment had a group within it at one point that ended up becoming MadOnion.com.
Oh.
And MadOnion.com was created as kind of a benchmarking utility. This is the benchmark that would eventually become 3D Mark and the Future Mark Corporation, which is where I first learned about Poets of the Fall when they had it in the credits for one of the 3D Mark programs.
Oh.
So, yeah.
That's so bizarre.
Control is a third-person action-adventure with a heavy dose of creepiness and alternate world history and reality thrown in.
Oh, we love our alternate world histories here. Let's see how consistent they can make it and how much I can scrutinize the heck out of it, because apparently that's my job.
I don't think you're going to get that type of detail that you're looking for. We're talking alternate world history to in a way that it makes sense that you don't know it.
Okay.
It's kind of like that behind-the-scenes type thing.
Okay.
It seems heavily inspired by or outright cribbing from stuff like the TV shows Sanctuary and Fringe, or the popular SCP Foundation, which stands for Secure, Control, Protect, which is a website which all three of those things surprisingly came out in 2008.
Well, specifically, Secure, Control, Protect was a bunch of Reddit submissions,
Yes.
if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you liked writing creepypasta, it was a great source for it.
And you know Fringe, because we did watch that. You might not know Sanctuary.
Part of it, yeah. I do not know Sanctuary.
So Sanctuary I first found out about when it was distributed through legit torrent sites back when I was torrenting. Sanctuary features Amanda Tapping from Stargate SG-1 as a kind of, they have to basically seek down supernaturals and kind of coerce them into working with them to protect the world and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I haven't seen it past the first episode. It was also one of the first shows to make heavy use of green screen instead of standing sets. So it also looks like it was made in 2008, actually on a budget in 2008.
Oh, that's bad. Poor 2008. Like, it looks so old, and it wasn't even 20 years ago. That was
well, it was cutting edge for the time, but it just ages poorly.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is another award-winning game just to continue that trend. We have Action Game of the Year, Outstanding Achievement in Game Design, numerous nominations and awards for Game of the Year, numerous wins for Technical Achievement, Outstanding Visual Effects in a Real-Time Project, which is from the Visual Effects Society, which I didn't know was a thing.
Makes sense, though. Got to have accolades in your...
Acting awards, again, it just keeps going. So.
Nice. Do we have any voice actors that we recognize?
No, not that I recognized.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody off the top. And a lot of these people are also mocapping.
Oh.
So we're talking like in Hellblade. Like not to that extent, but they're mocapping a little bit of their characters too.
Right.
We're going to gloss over some details and some atmospheric things just because this is a game that deserves to be played.
Yes, remember, we are not a walkthrough.
Right. We are Spoilers the Podcast.
We are literary analysis. So we are
Should we rebrand Spoilers the Podcast?
No. Spoilers will be our offshoot project where we debate whether or not the ending of Mass Effect is good.
So the funny thing there is we have tried to record a debate on the ending of Mass Effect 3 a few times now, and it ends up being always talking in circles and way too long. So we just haven't done it as a Patreon one yet.
We really tried. We actually really tried, and you guys would not want to hear it.
No.
Paying for it or otherwise. You just don't want to hear it.
So we play as Jessie Faden. She's 28, and she gets called to a building in New York City as she continues her search for her brother Dylan, who was taken by the Bureau when they were both living in ordinary Wisconsin.
Is that a real town?
No.
I was going to say.
I don't know what town it's based off of. They tend to base stuff off of real things in this universe, in that kind of adapting something real but changing the details so it's not.
Ordinary Wisconsin, not to be confused with bland Idaho.
Yeah.
Or boring Minnesota. Like just middle of nowhere places that you wouldn't even think about.
Yeah. So this building that she enters is the Federal Bureau of Control, a place that she has been searching for but has never been able to find.
Interesting. Is it like Schrodinger's Bureau?
No. Kind of?
Okay.
It depends what you mean by that. We'll get to it.
Uh-oh.
She is led there by, let's call it a sixth sense for now. And
oh no, is this brother her twin?
I don't know if they're her twin. I actually don't know that off the top of my head. I don't believe so. I don't know. Forgot that information. The place is creepy. It's a creepy monolith of a structure. It's actually based off the real-life building at 33 Thomas Street, formerly called the AT&T Long Lines Building.
Is it a tall, concrete, kind of Art Deco-ish kind of thing?
It's a tall, concrete, brutalist architecture thing, yes.
Oh, that's exactly what I figured.
In Lower Manhattan, it's a giant windowless skyscraper that's said to be one of the most secure buildings in the world.
Well, if you're just a big concrete and rebar windowless building, why, yes. As Legion said, windows are weaknesses.
Well, not in just that. Like, it can also withstand nuclear bombardment. Like, I don't think the building itself can, but if like a nuke goes off in New York, there's enough resources and food in there for all the employees to live for throughout fallout, like throughout like 2 or 3 weeks or something, like throughout the initial fallout and blast damage and everything.
Oh, jeez.
It houses massive telephone switching infrastructure and is likely the NSA mass surveillance site codenamed Titan Point. There's documentaries about this building.
Okay. So, but this is about a woman exploring someplace that's, I'm assuming, not that far from ordinary Wisconsin, or did she
No,
go?
she's in New York City.
She's in New York City, and she goes to this building in New York City.
Yes.
That is the bureau.
Yes.
That has her brother, whose name is what again?
Dylan. She doesn't know if her brother is there. She is led there by a separate sense, we're calling it. We'll get to what it is soon.
Oh no, supernatural things.
Oh yes.
Supernatural. Well, I know. I figured out with like the Fringe and the Sanctuary reference. Yes.
Here they call it paranatural, but close enough.
Oh, come on. Okay. Why's it got to be? Well, I guess they want to say it's natural, but it's not normal, so you don't want to call it paranormal.
Right.
Okay.
So when we enter this building's fictional counterpart, it is completely abandoned. There's not a soul around. There's people walking outside, walking past. Some are waiting for a bus. Not a single person is in the building lobby. And if it wasn't for the people outside, it's almost like a rapture happened. Not that there's clothes everywhere, but there's drinks, briefcases, like in places that you think people just grab them from when they were left or something.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. There are fire alarms scattered around as well. Well, more than I would expect, but truth be told, I don't pay attention to where fire alarms are in big buildings in real life. So maybe not.
I don't know either off the top of my head. That's one thing that working in the buildings I did in property management, they were never young enough to have those systems in there.
Oh. Mm-hmm. All the alarms, they're not ringing alarms, but they do include a seek shelter light, which is on.
Oh, that's creepy.
Right? So something weird is definitely going on here, but we eventually stumble across a janitor named Ati. Who is mopping the floor, almost oblivious to everything going on.
His headphones in.
Yes, he does have headphones. We'll come back to those eventually.
Is he listening to a podcast?
No. He's an old Finnish man, and he's a bit weird. Not because he's Finnish, but because he's a guy working night shift all alone.
I was going to say, we are not here to admonish the Finns. That is not our job.
Right. Having been somebody working night shift alone, it makes you a little weird.
You are a little weird, Mystic. You are a little weird, and I would agree that definitely probably did something to you. You usually weren't alone, luckily, so it wasn't your normal, but there were nights where you were alone and you were like, do you mind just being on the phone?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, I can be on the phone. I get it. Yeah. But I have to go to sleep. I'm sorry.
He remarks that Jessie must be there for the janitor's assistant job, and then we need to head to the elevator to get to the interview.
Janitor's assistant?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Tell them he sent us.
That's definitely code for something.
He then gives us some directions on where to go, and following them, we eventually arrive at the director's office. Now,
the director of this bureau would not be interviewing for the janitor's assistant.
Right.
So, this is definitely code for something.
So, before I go further, I had not played this game before I decided to do this episode.
Okay.
So I actually recorded myself playing it for the first hour, and that will be going up to patrons the day that we also release this to patrons. And already by this point, I played like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, something weird is here. Let me start over. I did kind of fake it a little bit for those 2 minutes or whatever. And let me see what weirdness happens. By this point, things have already gotten weird.
Oh, really?
Not just like, oh, there's clothes around. Like, rooms don't make sense.
The way they connect, or you leave them, you thought you're leaving the door you came in from, but you're in a different space and stuff like that. So that kind of reminds me of P.S. Advertisement for a board game we really like. There is a game we like called
Coma Ward.
Coma Ward, yes. And it's very much that kind of idea, is that there are things, it takes you a while to learn how to play the game, which stinks because it's all about surprises and alternate endings.
Right.
But once you know how to play the game, it's really interesting how you walk around and then you realize you leave a room and it's no longer what you thought it was.
Yeah.
Or you see something that you shouldn't have. Things like that.
Yeah, it's basically this universe type of game, like the paranatural and supernatural and all that other stuff all mixed into a hospital setting, which can get pretty gory. There is a trigger warning for this game, like literally in the manual.
Yeah, makes sense. Coma Ward's kind of like that too. And
no, that's what I'm saying. Like Coma Ward.
Oh yeah, it does. And I will say that if you wanted to do something that felt very Fringe-esque in a board game, Coma Ward definitely is it. So I can see now that I can already see where these parallels are making sense in the description.
So we get to the director's office, and right before we enter, we hear a gunshot.
Oh, that's not comforting at all.
Running in, we find Director Trench dead on the floor. His service weapon is right next to him.
Did he shoot himself?
That's the implication. Now,
where's the bullet hole?
In his head.
Between the eyes?
No, side.
Okay. So that is likely. I'm sorry, I am a true crime fan.
Do not worry about true crime in this.
There are things... I get that. I'm still not going to turn it off, though.
That's
the
fair.
brain is still going to do that.
So now, let's go back a little bit. That Sixth Sense I mentioned?
Yeah. Not the movie?
Not the movie. It took me a while playing this to figure this out. Because it's like a presence with Jessie.
Oh.
It appears almost like a ghostly iris that kind of directs her to things and reacts to things. And it's called Polaris. It's what brought her to the building, and it's now pointing her towards the gun on the floor. Also, there is something really bad happening just outside the door she just came from.
Oh, that means you got to close the door and pick up the gun.
Door's already closed.
Yeah, okay.
But you see like red, like waves of like red energy or whatever coming, like bubbling on it and stuff.
This is the worst interview ever.
No, we haven't gotten to the interview yet. There is an interview, amazingly.
No, you're kidding me. This is the pre-interview? This is like the part where you're filling out the paperwork where you let them know what your name is and what your credentials are? No, which I hate because you have my resume. You know what my credentials are. Why did I fill this out also on the website? And then again, when I'm sitting down to do the... Like, what is this? Where I currently work for did not ask for that. Let me tell you. So much smarter.
So we grab the gun, and then things go from weird, creepy to just a bit more off the walls.
Uh-oh.
We end up, like, as soon as we touch the gun, we end up in the astral plane.
Oh, excuse me? What?
So the astral plane is a place between dimensions.
Yes, I have played Dungeons & Dragons. I know what you're talking about. And
we have to basically find the gun in the astral plane. The gun is alive, by the way. It doesn't talk, but it's a thing. It's a real living thing.
How is this not Dungeons & Dragons? You have a talking weapon.
It doesn't talk. It's just a living thing.
Does it have feelings? Like, can you figure out its mood?
Somebody can. I don't know if we can.
Yeah, this feels like... So, does it have an alignment? Like, there's just...
Being able to control the gun basically determines if you are the director of the agency.
What? Wait, I'm sorry? Please explain.
So, okay. When Adi told us about the interview, he's not lying. It's just not up the elevator. It's on a whole nother plane of reality. And when we get to the astral plane, we meet the board. Now, we're going to pause another moment here and cover over a lot of terms we just kind of glossed over, and some terms we'll have to know before we continue.
Okay.
So paranatural is a term used by the Federal Bureau of Control to refer to elements which violate the known laws of nature and reality. So far, so good. The ostensible goal of the FBC is to contain, study, and ultimately gain control over these elements, hence the name.
Sounds very American government.
Yes.
Strategy-wise kind of thing.
Examples of paranatural phenomena include altered items, which are ordinary objects that have been acted upon by paranatural forces.
Okay, like a gun that has its own feelings, yeah.
Objects of power, which are altered objects with connections to the astral plane and can bestow weird powers on para-utilitarians.
Para-utilitarian, so those who use paranatural...
Those who have paranatural ability, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the gun is an object of power.
Okay.
Objects of power in this game pretty much are things that give the player abilities.
Okay.
Fair. But that's gameplay. We're talking story. Places of power, which is a location that has been acted upon by paranatural forces. Places of power operate under their own internal logic and do not obey the laws of our reality. The building we're in is one of those.
Okay. Which is why it has no windows, because you don't want anybody seeing when you're breaking the laws of reality.
Even if it had windows, you could break the laws of reality.
Yeah, but do you really want people accidentally seeing that?
I don't know if they'd be able to.
It's in New York City. Yeah, there'd be a building right next to it, and they'd see right in there.
Other dimensions, which is fair.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And altered world events, which are events in which paranatural forces intrude upon perceived reality, resulting in reality being altered.
Okay.
AWEs are responsible for the existence of altered items and objects of power. All of that, so far, so good.
Right.
That's roughly most of the big terms we need.
I'm just going to mention briefly something I wrote a blog post on years ago when I had a blog spot. You can probably still find it. It's under D20 Sapphire. I don't know, though. I don't maintain it. Anyway, I don't mind with the idea of, like, paranormal, paranatural, supernatural, things that give you the heebie-jeebies at night, whatever we're calling it. I don't mind that in fiction being a part of, the story play. I just don't like it when it starts to get to the point where it explains things that are too big. It's one thing to say, for example, let's take JFK assassination. So many conspiracy theories. Let's just say that. I'm not going to reference the thing I wrote on in my blog because problematic. But so it's one thing to say that one of the security guards was distracted because they were actually a vampire hunter and somebody in the crowd was like the liege of a vampire. It is another thing entirely to say that JFK was actually ruled by Catholic vampires and that's why he was assassinated. Like, to me, there's a leap between the two that for the kind of fiction I read, I don't get into. It's just not for me. So
I haven't dug into the history of the FBC beyond what we need for the game to begin with.
Right, and the game probably doesn't go much farther than that, to be honest.
But from my read, it doesn't seem to dive into big events like that. All the events that we kind of reference as AWEs tend to be self-contained within the fictional universe.
Okay, cool.
I could be wrong about that, but I think that's...
And I'm totally fine with that. It's just a critique I like to bring up because history means something to people, and when you explain it away with certain fictional tropes or certain fictional ideas, it feels like you're diminishing the complexity of his historical issues. I would rather have a piece of fiction like this that makes their own events that are important and were part of history and kind of made things a little wibbly-wobbly in this alternate history, rather than trying to explain away huge moments by relating them into some sort of fictional conspiracy or fictional backdrop with these elements of the story, because it just, again, it diminishes the impact importance of the historical moment and the nuance of those moments. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes.
We don't have to focus on it long. It's just a critique I wanted to bring up, and I appreciate that Control, it seems to not be doing that from what your assessment is.
Yeah. This sounds like a Patreon discussion.
We will discuss further in our Patreon. It sounds like Mystic disagrees with me, and we're going to have... And I'll mention the problematic reference that I wrote about in my blog spot in that too. I think we can make it a quick discussion. but I just wanted to mention that quickly.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So, but all of those terms, fine, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the board is a paranatural entity within the astral plane. It actually looks like a giant inverted black pyramid.
So it's not a group of entities, it's one entity?
Yeah.
Okay.
They just call it the board. And there's more paranatural entities. We'll get to them. For the record, Polaris is not a paranatural entity, but a extra-dimensional resonance-based entity. I have no idea what the distinction is, but there is a distinction.
You lost me on that premise, but okay. Also, now when you say the board is one entity, now I just imagine a shadow-draped ironing board. That's all. That's how I'm going to see it. I know you said it's an inverted pyramid.
Yes.
I did hear you. My brain refuses to acknowledge that reality and has made its own.
I call you Adam Savage. So the board appoints Jessie the new director of the FBC, which is
wow,
a heck of an interview.
Wow.
Which allows
all she did was come in, embrace that there's creepy stuff, and take a gun, and now she's the director of the...
There's more to this. We're going to uncover her past as we go.
So was her search for her brother part of the build up to this?
We'll get there.
I'm sorry, I'm a writer. I know where things go sometimes.
So this allows her to use the service weapon with basically these paratotalitarian psychic powers that she has.
Okay.
So the board requests that Jessie protect the Bureau. Spurred on by this request, Polaris and her desire to find her brother, Jessie continues on her mission to explore the building, which is in fact called the Oldest House.
Okay.
And combat the threats within.
There are threats within?
Yes. Those threats are all the result of an attack by the Hiss. The Hiss is also some sort of extra-dimensional resonance being like Polaris.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Hiss.
However, while Polaris seems to react and have some form of thought and motive, even if we don't know what it is, the Hiss does not express any form of consciousness or will, only exuding a sickening aura of menace and animosity.
So that sounds like it's the remnant from some great paranatural event.
Kind of.
You know.
It has spread throughout the FBC like a virus, corrupting the very structure of the building and seemingly every person inside but Ati.
Interesting.
These corrupted people float in the air, reciting an ominous incantation, or become thralls that attack Jessie on sight.
So the gun's very useful at this point.
Enemies also drop health. Little tiny blue pixels of health.
Blue pixels of health?
Yeah. I wasn't getting damaged by the first one, so I'm like, what are these blue sparkles? And then I did get damaged during one of the fights, and I was like, oh.
Be nice if this was much more clear.
It was clear. I just didn't pay attention because I was playing this game for the first time at about 1 a.m.
Yeah, that's a
which
that's
didn't
a you
help
problem.
my brain.
Yeah.
Jessie's mind is assaulted by the Hiss in a nightmarish wave, but it seems that Jessie is able to repel the Hiss with her considerable willpower and the help of Polaris. This ability allows Jessie to cleanse various control points in the Oldest House, restoring a sense of safety and normalcy to each area she passes through.
Okay.
Or at least as normal as a building that houses a murderous refrigerator can be.
What is this, Ghostbusters?
It is a fridge that is covered with a child's artwork. The artwork cannot be removed or damaged in any way, and if somebody is not watching the fridge at all times, it kills someone. Usually the person who's not watching it when their gaze flickers.
So you blink and it kills you.
I don't think it's so much blink, but it's like if you divert your attention for too long, you die. Through some way that doesn't make sense. But anyway.
You have to walk away from it? Do you have to walk backwards from the
No, there's a
fridge?
guy who's sitting there watching it for over 24 hours and he gets his attention diverted and then there's just a pile of blood. Do not know.
Why don't we just lock up the fridge? Or have a camera feed on it. I don't know.
So after clearing the first of these points, which includes a pretty tough fight with an FBC Ranger, Randall Polanski, who killed me 4 times, because, again, 1:30 in the morning by this point.
Yeah.
Jessie meets Emily Pope. She is a researcher in the FBC and becomes a bit of a confidant as we go through the story.
Okay.
Pope was one of the few people protected from the hiss by an HRA, a Hadron Resonance Amplifier.
Ooh.
Not a Hadron Resonance Amplifier, a Hadron Resonance Amplifier. We'll get there.
Okay.
It's a wearable device created by the missing head of research, Dr. Casper Darling, who looks a bit... I think I called him in my video when I was playing. I think he looked like Paul F. Tompkins, but not 100%. It's just something about the way that he's wearing glasses reminds me of a photo of Paul F. Tompkins. But anyway.
Okay.
And Dr. Casper Darling describes the Hadron Resonance Amplifier thusly. Think of them as a life preserver. Only instead of water, the thing HRAs protect you from is classified. One day that classified, not water, might pour in, and you'll be glad you've got an HRA keeping you afloat. And if you don't have an HRA, don't worry, it'll be quick and painless. End quote.
That's a yikes from me. I never got into the stuff kind of like, like we tried the Fringe and X-Files and that kind of thing. My mother loved X-Files. I don't know. I find people more scary than supernatural things, so my horror has never really
don't worry, we'll get to people making mistakes too.
Oh, goody. It's like they heard me complaining from years in the future.
Suddenly, Ted Farrow appears now.
No! This episode is over if that happens. I'm done. I've had enough Ted Farrow in my life. And if
we'll have to go back to that eventually.
If he comes back in Forbidden West, I'm just going to be pissed, okay? At least give me some more recovery time, all right? I need a little more recovery time.
So Jessie and Emily discover that people infected by the hiss are essentially already dead. You try to cleanse one of them and they're still dead. So
you can cleanse their body, but they've already...
Cleansing them doesn't save them. They're dead anyway. Okay. So Jessie and Emily remain determined to defeat the hiss in order to clear the oldest house of its corruption and basically make the Bureau able to do its job again.
Right, exactly.
So Jessie goes on to explore the building with Emily's help, finding more objects of power and places of power similar to the service weapon. The hotline is a phone that allows Jessie to communicate with the board directly, while the Ocean View Motel is a threshold, basically another dimension, that allows Jessie to move through the ever-shifting areas of the oldest house.
Okay, back to the image of the board. It now has a big muscle arm.
With a phone.
Yeah.
Other objects of power simply give Jessie abilities for combat or traversal, which is an understatement, though of course that's a gameplay aspect of it. The objects do have their own stories and such. For example, her ability Evade, which is like a dash ability, comes from a merry-go-round horse.
Oh.
The merry-go-round horse was originally part of a carousel ride in an abandoned amusement park, which was the subject of local rumors reporting that the rides moved on their own, chasing out trespassers.
Oh.
When the FBC investigated, they found 3 dead locals, if I remember correctly, and the horse attacked one of the agents before they were able to control it.
Ouch. Wow. But only trespassers.
Apparently.
So, like, during normal business hours...
No, it's abandoned.
Oh.
Yeah.
But I wonder what happened before it was abandoned, that's all.
Ati soon calls on Jessie, his assistant, to get to work. He instructs her to restore power by clearing the NSC power plant. We'll get there.
They have a power plant? Why does every place have a power plant?
NSC has specific meaning.
I'm sorry, but we've been playing video games with little buddy. In Super Mario Odyssey, there's a power plant plot. I feel like in a lot of games, there's a power plant plot.
Yeah.
So...
From the power plant, Jessie must use her skills to clear up more of the oldest house, encountering other survivors along the way. Jessie learns that she should seek out Dr. Darling, the aforementioned missing head of research, in his laboratory, and that her younger brother is held in a containment facility called the Panopticon.
Not a twin, a younger brother.
Sorry.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. So that is not where her powers came from. Thank you for not leaning on that trope, writers of Control.
Oh, what's that?
Even though I've leaned on it
Tell
from
me
time
why.
to time. Yes, which that one didn't bother me as much because it was very much. It's a storytelling game. It's a walking simulator.
Yeah.
So it felt a little less like.
I don't know if I'd call that one a walking simulator as much.
I think it functions in the same way. So, I mean, it's not like Dear Esther, which is literally
a walking
simulator. But yes. But yeah, no, I appreciate that the twin sibling bond is not the source of their powers as much as I have used that plot before.
Upon finding Dylan's cell, Jessie discovers that he has escaped. However, he has also voluntarily turned himself over to FBC agents. He is simply waiting for her back at the executive wing, which is kind of Emily and Jessie's command center at this point. Dylan was corrupted by the hiss, but he has maintained some of his former self.
Wow.
It is unclear how sane he was before the hiss got to him, and he finds the hiss kind of a friendly presence, even taking some pleasure from its corruption. He seems to trust Jessie, but has deep hatred for Polaris, telling Jessie not to trust her.
Interesting.
Dylan welcomed the hiss as an escape from the oppressive Bureau, as well as Dr. Darling and Director Trench, whom he resents and despises. Throughout the rest of the game, Dylan at times represents the hiss, acting as a symbolic opposite to Jessie and Polaris. After speaking to Dylan for the first time in 17 years, Jessie goes to the Prime Candidate program to find out what happened to him when they were apart. Now let's go back in time a little.
So wait, 17. She's 28. 17 years. She was 11. He was how old when they left?
7, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now let's go back in time a little bit. Director Zachariah Trench is not the first director. He's not even the second director. I think he's the third director.
That makes sense.
He was tied up in the demise of his predecessor, Broderick Northmore. The power of being director and being such a strong para-utilitarian kind of went to Northmore's head. However, after losing control of his paranatural powers, Northmore eventually agreed to resign as director and keep the lights on in the oldest house at Zachariah Trench's urging. He was sealed alive in the NSC power plant in maintenance sector and became the oldest house's main power source.
I'm sorry, what?
He has a lot of paranatural ability.
He literally gets to retire by becoming
a power plant.
A power plant?
In fact, the NSC is like Northmore Sarcophagus something. That's what the NSC stands for. So basically, he is allowed to continue serving the FBC without actually endangering it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it gets weird. Trench, though, is afraid of what would happen if he also gets too enamored with the objects of power and decides to start a program to groom a successor. They sought out promising candidates, presumably people with paranatural ability or such, like people who are wrapped up in AWEs.
Yeah.
We know nothing about the first 5 candidates.
Oh.
We do know that numbers 6 and 7 were Dilly and Jessie Faden after their experience, which we'll get to.
Uh-oh.
Dylan was kidnapped and raised in captivity as a prime candidate to become director of the FBC, prime candidate number 6. Jessie was left in the outside world to be observed by the FBC as a kind of control group and was designated prime candidate 7.
So that's why it's control. She is the control.
Yeah. Also, the Federal Bureau of Control,
There's also Federal Bureau of Control. Yeah, there's a lot of play on words. You're trying to regain control. Yeah, I get it. But that's, you are the control. You are the, okay.
This revelation leads Jessie to explore deeper into the oldest house in an attempt to learn more hidden secrets about the events of her childhood that led to Dylan's capture.
So, and so they kidnapped the younger boy and they've kept the older girl out there as a control. I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting choice there. I guess if you're 7 versus 11, you're a little bit more pliable as well.
Also, it could just be he was more naturally attuned to controlling it, like having the abilities, and she just wasn't as, like, maybe whatever reading they took wasn't as good. Who knows?
Right.
I'm sure it's explained somewhere, and I just missed it. That's fine. There's a lot to miss in this game. There's memos everywhere.
Oh, man. I love a good codex.
Oh, there's redacted memos everywhere, too. Because, of course, there are.
Yeah, it's on brand.
In the area dedicated to researching the ordinary AWE, Jessie finds the Bureau's records of her past. Now, the Ordinary Altered World event was a paranormal event that took place in Jessie and Dylan's hometown, Ordinary, Wisconsin, as we mentioned.
Yes.
The two children found an object of power in the town's dump, a slide projector capable of opening doors to other dimensions.
Ooh.
While exploring these other dimensions, the two children found mostly strange and terrifying things, like places where if you stood there too long, everything started to melt. Like, it gets weird.
Oh, yeah. Run back out. Seriously.
But in slide 36, they found the benevolent entity now known as Polaris.
Oh.
However, a hostile entity from one of the other slides called Not Mother corrupted several children and caused all the adults in Ordinary to suddenly disappear.
All of the adults?
Yeah. Unable to turn off the projector, Jessie put in slide 36, where Polaris is from, and burned all the other slides. Polaris then enabled Jessie and Dylan to turn off the projector, but the damage was already done. Only 17 people survived the Ordinary AWE.
So they had to, at their very young ages, destroy this thing. So wait, and Dylan did it by, he put the one slide that Polaris was...
Jessie put the slide in.
Jessie put the slide where Polaris is from. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Not Dylan. Burned the rest of it on fire. And then what did Polaris do to help?
Basically allowed them to turn off the projector.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Dr. Darling and the FBC investigated, they took Dylan away. The projector and slide 36 were taken, while then Director Trench kept a burned slide for himself.
Oh, that's not a good sign.
Dylan was raised to be the next director and used to investigate further into slide 36. I believe it's called Hand. It's like a desert with 5 pillars on it.
That's not good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as he was groomed for directorship, Dylan became more unstable as his powers grew, leading to his ultimate containment in Panopticon.
Okay.
Dr. Darling also encountered Hedron on slide 36, a benevolent extra-dimensional entity related to Polaris.
Okay.
Darling brought Hedron into the oldest house, allowing Polaris to enter our dimension using Hedron as a resonance point.
Oh, but I have a feeling this is going to backfire.
At this time, Hedron and Polaris were believed to be the same being. Now, Hedron we talked about already. We're going to get into Hedron more right now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Darling's relationship with Hedron seemed to alter his behavior, worrying Dr. Trench. Hedron apparently warned Darling just before the Hiss invaded, allowing him to create the HRAs, the Hedron Resonance Amplifiers, just in time to save a few people.
Oh, wow. So
Hedron seems beneficial. Polaris seems beneficial to within their own whims.
Right. They have their own
agenda.
But at the same time, they don't seem to have any maniacal or devious goals.
Yeah, they're not actively malicious.
Okay.
After learning all of this, Jessie goes on to try and find the slide projector object of power in dimensional research, which is a department. In order to reach that area, Jessie first goes to Foundation, seemingly the origin point of the oldest house. There she has to navigate the ashtray maze, which is between her and dimensional research.
Ashtray maze.
Yes. It is a labyrinth of shifting corridors created by the ashtray object of power under the binding of Director Trench in order to safeguard dimensional research and the slide projector.
Oh, interesting.
The nature of the maze causes anyone who happens upon it to become hopelessly lost or turned around, and permits only one bound to the object of power, as well as those they designate, to pass through. Trench is dead. Jessie isn't designated. But help comes from one strange Finnish man.
Oh, come here, janitor, who I am the assistant to.
Ahti gives Jessie his headphones, and with them she is able to navigate the maze. Ahti is clearly not just a man made a little weird by working long nights alone.
Yes.
In fact, he is, for all intents and purposes, assumed to be a extra-dimensional entity himself.
Oh, okay.
He literally just does mundane tasks around the oldest house, but the Bureau doesn't stop him because it does seem to actually help them.
He's just...
It's like he's mopping the floor in one dimension, but in another dimension he's doing something else. you know?
Oh, okay. So he's able to extend his being across dimensions, and therefore
That's
has a better understanding of
my
certain
understanding
things? Okay.
of a way it could work. I don't know what it actually is. They don't explain what it actually is because that would
fair.
ruin the fun.
Right.
In dimensional research, Jessie discovers the Hedron resonance lab where Dr. Darling disappeared. Jessie inadvertently allows the hiss to enter the Hedron chamber, however, and Hedron is finally destroyed by the hiss. This casts Polaris out of our dimension, but Jessie believes that Polaris has been destroyed.
Oh.
Because Polaris can't help Jessie, this finally allows the hiss to reach the board and corrupt Jessie's mind.
Oh, no.
Roll credits.
What?
Seriously, credits start rolling. However, the credits slowly become distorted and melting away into the true ending sequence for the game. Jessie finds herself an FBC bureaucrat. Caught in a time loop, Jessie sees ominous visions of a hiss-powered Dylan, herself and Trench symbolically vying for the seat of the director.
Oh.
With the help of Ati and a message from Dr. Darling, who has seemingly entered the astral plane with the board,
Oh, interesting.
Jessie manages to resist the hiss illusion and become the true director of the FBC. She locates Polaris in the Ocean View Motel, which we mentioned before,
Right.
and becomes the new resonance point for Polaris to enter our dimension, as opposed to dragging it from Hedron. It is revealed that Director Trench and his burn projector slide were the original source of the hiss invasion.
Of course.
Remember we talked about not letting the power get to your head?
Right.
To his credit, he was influenced by the hiss, but he became fearful that Dr. Darling and Hedron would take over the Bureau. When Darling gave out their HRAs, Trench took it as a sign of attempted takeover. He placed his burn slide into the slide projector, which allowed the hiss to invade the Bureau.
Oh my gosh.
Newly empowered by Polaris, Jessie manages to shut off the slide projector and close the entry into the hiss realm. Jessie then makes her way to her brother Dylan. She at last manages to cleanse Dylan of the hiss, obviously after some fighting and stuff. Fortunately, because he still has a residual connection to Polaris from his childhood, he does not die.
Oh my gosh. Lucky him.
Instead, he enters a deep coma.
Oh, not so lucky.
With the hiss now cut off from its source of power, Jessie determines to clear its remnants from the oldest house before ending the FBC lockdown. And now, Jessie is the true director, and Dylan is still at the coma as we end the game. Now,
so hints for a sequel. How do we get
not even
Jessie
just
back?
that. There are 2 DLCs.
Wow.
We will not cover those here. We'll cover them in another episode because one of them, the second one, is literally tied to the main storyline for another franchise we'll cover, Alan Wake.
Holy crap. So
Yeah, the 2 universes are linked.
wow.
Yeah. Also, there's a sequel to Control on the way.
Wait, and I think I know the story of Alan Wake because I watched a really good video essay on it.
Well, I don't, so don't spoil it unless you want to cover it.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll stop talking now and I'll let you cover it.
You can cover it.
I did spoil the game for myself because it was a really good
Oh, then that's how
video
you cover
game
it then.
essay. I would have to watch some Let's Plays.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Also, there's a sequel to Control on the way and a sequel to Alan Wake. So we'll be back in this universe for sure.
Oh, man. This is a lot deeper than I thought. This is less of a rabbit hole and more of an oversized ant colony.
So yeah, I don't know the story to Alan Wake at all. I didn't even look into it for this because once I found out it was tied to another game, I'm like, well, let me do that game before we look into the DLC.
Yeah.
So,
okay. It's interesting. I might rewatch that essay now that I realize. But
not to jump on your conversation, but I have no idea what Alan Wake is about. Like, the only thing I know is that he's a writer. That's it.
there's some interesting First of all, the essay was basically arguing, and it's spoilery to argue this, but it was arguing that Alan Wake is one of the best continuations of American genres of horror because it kind of ties in elements of Lovecraft, which problematic author, but interesting content with also Stephen King and the idea of like isolation and vastness and small town horror. So there's and I think a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe as well. So these influences in American horror are kind of wrapped up in Alan Wake.
Okay.
So with that being said, though, I'm really glad we talked about Control, because that sounds really interesting. I still don't know if I understand half of how everything works in this paranatural web that was weaved, but it's pretty cool and has apparently a strong female lead as well.
Yep.
Bonus.
Now you get to play it next.
I do, and I can't promise I'm going to play it well.
Fair.
Yeah.
There's no there's some platform, but not much.
See, you can't even promise there's no platforming, guys. But you catch
the astral plane has some platforming.
Okay, so you'll catch us on the live stream after this is released to the public. You will see how well I do. And before that, if you'd like to visit us on alternate Thursdays on our live stream on YouTube,
Skies of Arcadia.
That's what we're doing. We've now figured out the name
we're on the way through South Ocean. That's next episode. It'll be such a fun episode.
a lot of random battles, I assume.
A lot of random battles.
But we've named a barbershop quartet the Dinettes.
Oh God, yeah, we did.
I'm so proud of myself.
All right, well, hopefully we'll catch you at the streams. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much. We'll catch you next time, one way or another.
Bye.
Bye.